Earlier this year, way back in January, on the 16th, Nintendo released an HD remaster of a classic Wii game. On the same day, they also revealed the Switch 2. Donkey Kong Country Returns was going to fall under most people's radar. The game was full price, released in January, quickly made and remastered, while also releasing on the most important day in Nintendo's last 5 years. But it's not a bad game. This is the predecessor of one of the best platformers of all time, at the same price as said platformer. Of course, there's still merit to Donkey Kong Country Returns, even though Tropical Freeze is likely a better game. Just because what came next is better doesn't mean the first game isn't worth looking back to. This is Retro Studios' first Donkey Kong game. This was their second time revitalizing a Nintendo series that had been forgotten. It was a part of the platformer renaissance of the Wii era along with New Super Mario Bros. And Rayman Origins. Those games would also be succeeded upon by new entries in their series, just as Donkey Kong Country Returns would be. There's still good games though, same with DKCR. Going back to this game was pretty fun. I played it on the 3DS when I was a kid, and thought it was way too hard back then. When I was younger, I was shocked at how difficult a Mario game or a Mario spin-off would be. More recently, like last year and early this year, I was playing the game on the Wii as well. I've had a ton of experience with this game, and I can say that this is the best version of it. In a few short months at the time of writing, Nintendo is releasing another revitalization of Donkey Kong. He's one of their most malleable characters. There's no other series that could be changed so many times, while still being incredibly fun. What else has been turned from an arcade game to a platformer, a puzzle game, a 3D platformer, a rhythm game, a fast fluid platformer, and now once again going back to 3D better than ever before? There's other Donkey Kong games I didn't mention. They're too weird to even describe. Now that we're close to another new era of Donkey Kong, with new designs and another high price tag, I guess it's worth asking if Retro Studios' first new era of Donkey Kong was good, and more importantly, if the Switch version was anything close to special. I'll say this, Donkey Kong Country Returns is a flawed game. Those flaws more apparent with age and more experience by the developers. There's hardly a comparison between this game and Tropical Freeze. One is so finely refined, while the other was the first steps of this studio in a new genre. Now 15 years on from the original release, there are some reasons to not want to play it, but there are multiple reasons to return to it. Some of the levels here are the best in the series. In fact, they're better than almost every other platformer. When I think of what makes Retro Studios' Donkey Kong games great, I picture the silhouette levels. These are amazing here. The contrast between the blackened environment and the bright red of DK's tie was and is the best moment in the game, in my opinion. There are moments that miss the high, but no other platforming game has had a moment as cool as this one. Other games do this, but none replicate Donkey Kong's masterful variation of it. While there is a lot of good here, many flaws are present, such as poor hit detection during certain moments, massive difficulty spikes, though those are made easier with items, as well as overall padding. This is not a short platformer, but it could have been way more replayable if the levels weren't so challenging. I have other issues, but I also have a list of things to praise, which I'll do in time. This game may have issues, but it's also a good experience for a Wii-era platformer revival. The competition was good too, but I enjoy this game just as much. This remaster was developed by Forever Entertainment, a studio behind many poor remakes and remasters in the past. Nintendo funded part of this studio years ago, so expect more work from the team. This is a decent enough remaster, although if it was done internally, I'm sure most of the issues would have been fixed. Nintendo certainly cheaped out on the port to Switch, and that cheapness was obvious from the first reveal, along with the release. From a controversy about the hair on DK's character model, to visual effects during levels, it's clear Nintendo didn't give this game the love it needed to be miles better than the Wii or 3DS versions. However, the work remastering DKCR was perfectly okay, and the game itself was already perfectly fine, because it's the best version of the game in HD, with the controls and levels of the 3DS version, and better graphics than the Wii version. This is likely to be the final and definitive release of Donkey Kong Country Returns. At the end of the day, this remaster was a filler title in between a great Wii U port, the next Retro Studios project, and the Switch 2 release. One of the best aspects of DKC Returns is the art style. It's hard not to look at this game as having the perfect design of Donkey Kong. It's beautifully recreated Rareware's classic design in a lush 2.5D game. It's not just the models that are good though, in fact, the whole game is. There's a real cohesion to the levels. Backgrounds look beautiful, the setting of the wilderness feels incredible. The safari theme and the island areas in the game were incredibly unique for the genre and for Donkey Kong too. The theming of Donkey Kong Country games are always amazing. They've always been better than the entire industry, and once again, 15 years later, they're still leagues above the competition. The game shines artistically. It looked great 15 years ago, it looked great today, and it will look great 15 years from now. This is one of the most timeless aesthetics to any game, something the Wii-era platformer revivals generally succeeded at. There's a reason why such a bare-bones remaster is able to have a decades-old game look better than modern platformers. The graphics weren't overhauled, they always looked this stellar. Another stellar part of the graphics are the cutscenes, which have seemingly been redone in the remaster. There isn't much of a story told, but the animation of these cutscenes were so fluid, and more importantly, really entertaining. Watching them felt like a reward from a grueling boss, or as an interesting way to jump into a level. The cleanness really reminded me of older niche 3D animations that used to air on TV when I was a kid. I would never go back to them, but I remember them fondly. In the same way I'll remember DKCR's cutscenes fondly for years to come. There's no point to having cutscenes though if the game doesn't have a story. And for what it's worth, the story won't blow your mind. This is no JRPG, it's a platformer starring an ape trying to get bananas back. Regardless, it's actually pretty fun. The Tiki Tak tribe serve as the main antagonists here, and they're pretty cute. They mind control animals, steal DK's bananas, run amok on Donkey Kong's island, and more importantly are quite funny. They may not be as interesting as the Kremlings, and the final boss is nowhere near as cool as King K. Rool, but once again, they're still neat. As an original invention by Retro Studios, they fleshed the world out enough, and for a series that didn't have a massive amount of lore, they certainly add to the canon. One of the best parts of the story is how it influences the levels, meaning if the Tiki Tak tribe built a rocket ship, that world would have been a factory, where in each level you can see how a rocket ship would have been built in Donkey Kong's universe. Then later, DK can break through that very rocket ship. Most worlds aren't done like this though, they follow the traditional archetypes of platformers, meaning there's fire, desert, and grass worlds. But because this game has a specific part of the real world it's been influenced by, these levels shine. The impact of sub-Saharan Africa on the game's theming is certainly present, from beautiful orangish environments to the very animals from Africa and even the trees. The inspiration from an often unseen part of the world, at least unseen in video games, minor or not, was definitely a fun inclusion. There is no other platformer with the theming of Donkey Kong Country Returns. However good the level themes are, the music on the other hand was one of the less memorable or worst aspects of the game. No hate to the composer, but it's not memorable aside from the songs that are imitating Rare or David Wise's classic tunes. There's one specific level called Blowhole Bound where midway through a remix of aquatic ambience from the original Donkey Kong Country plays. That single moment was one of the best in the game. Unfortunately, the rest of the soundtrack isn't noticeable, and more importantly, the rest of the soundtrack is bland. But what about the gameplay though? Well, I touched on it earlier, but it's decent. This is no Rayman Legends, Mario Wonder, or even Tropical Freeze. Those are the successors of some relatively great platformers from the same time frame, but the gameplay is still good. DK's basic moveset barely changed between games, so if you love Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze or the original games, it's an easy enough experience to return to. In DKCR, Donkey Kong has some new abilities, mainly blowing air, where if you press down on the D-pad plus X or Y he'll blow air. This mechanic makes more sense when you play it on the Wii with motion controls, and isn't important whatsoever, even if it's a funny animation. This slows down the gameplay, is rarely used outside of puzzles and a couple enemies, and it suddenly makes sense why it would be removed in the next release. Outside of one action, Donkey Kong's moveset has been static. It's hardly changed over the course of decades, except for better fluidity. He's had the same moves since the first Donkey Kong Country. You can roll off a ledge and jump to recover. Diddy Kong adds to DK's movement, letting him roll longer and hover in the air briefly. Unlike Tropical Freeze, Diddy Kong is the only companion. And unlike the classic games, Rambi is the only mountable character. Platforming wise, the game's quite fun, though there are multiple levels that aren't. The longer I played the game, the angrier I became. The later levels were extremely difficult, some taking well over 20 lives to beat. I skipped 2 levels of the base game in total, though I went and finished one of them. The last one I skipped was the final level before the last boss fight. Outside of some difficulty spikes, the first 4 or so worlds are great. These acclimate the player to the controls and are really inspired. These are some of the best in the game. The next few take all of the experience from the first couple worlds and really test your skill as a player. The only bad world is arguably the last one. Levels aren't quick, they are more focused on tighter platforming and less so on fun movement. Aside from those levels though, the game is great. In each level, there's a different number of puzzle pieces to collect, along with letters spelling K-O-N-G. This is the main replay value of the game outside of time attack and multiplayer. The only issue I had with the collectibles was the difficulty of finding some, and the fact that collecting a Kong letter doesn't save until the player reaches a checkpoint. Speaking of checkpoints, they're often infrequent in levels and generate a lot of rage later on, when there's only a few per level with multiple challenging stretches between them. Some levels are more focused on tight platforming, others on simple fun, and others are gimmicky and bad. For example, the first minecart and rocket bear levels are quite enjoyable. Eventually they suck, and I never enjoyed doing them, outside of one. That being Mole Patrol, which for some reason was actually really fun. The best part of the game is the levels, and they aren't often letdowns. The theming and the Rambi levels, along with various bosses, are all quite fun. Some of these levels look almost modern visually, while any level with water hasn't aged well, or more realistically, it was ported over improperly. The biggest problem with this remaster is the lack of any new features, new levels, or anything. Aside from a few references to the Switch and upgraded graphics, there isn't anything special here. Seemingly no new accessibility features which could have been here. Speaking of accessibility, if you can't finish a level, the game will skip it. There are also items available at Cranky Kong's shop, that make the levels much easier to finish. Certain levels are almost impossible if you lose Diddy Kong, so for that level maybe stock up on barrels. A proper remaster would have done something to make the game easier. The hearts are still increased from the 3DS version, and there are extra ones available for purchase at the shop. That's kind of cheating, and I wish there was a better way to finish the game without anger, skipping levels, and making Donkey Kong invincible. Another problem that I had with the remaster were multiple frame rate issues, where very briefly the game would stutter or skip a frame. The whole game ran perfectly well, except for a few moments. And the footage on screen during this video, maybe some are noticeable. I'm not sure. I usually have zero issues with frame rate in games, on my PS5 or on my Switch, even my older PC. I play every Nintendo game in handheld mode, and normally I have no issues. Games such as Mario & Luigi Brothership or The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom I never noticed frame rate drops in, but here it happened multiple times, almost always at random intervals. When nothing was on screen or when the game was hectic, there isn't a noticeable cause for the frame rate troubles. This is likely an issue with the engine and the studio behind the remaster, but it's something to take note of if you only play the smoothest platformers. In that case, wait for a Switch 2 upgrade. Overall, this is a decent game with a great 3DS version and a decent Switch port. In most ways, it's worse than Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, but in a few small ways, it's undeniably better. This was Retro Studios' first try at Donkey Kong, and it's hard to say they didn't succeed. This game may not be flawless, but overall, I think Donkey Kong Country Returns is a perfectly fine game that, compared to Rare's trilogy, is the perfect successor. And the Switch version has all of what made the prior releases good, with a few problems that, while annoying, don't take away from the overall package. It has the levels of the 3DS version while also having the graphics upscaled from the Wii. I think Donkey Kong Country Returns is worth going back to, though my answer depends person to person. For full price, no way. For someone who doesn't like platformers, no way. For someone who struggles at challenging games, once again, no way. But if you can find it for a good sale, or get it as a gift, or if the game appeals to you at all, it's great to go back to. If you're even the smallest fan of Donkey Kong, you need to play this game. If you've only played Tropical Freeze, you need to play this game. And that's where Donkey Kong Country Returns shined brightest, as an additional experience after beating the better titles around it. There are reasons to find this game better than Tropical Freeze, but they aren't the most justifiable. As it stands, Donkey Kong Country Returns is quite fun, with some great levels, some difficult platforming with more to love than to dislike. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, it would mean the world to me if you liked it, commented, or subscribed to my channel. Pretty much anything that helps the algorithm. I've been super focused on this channel this year, and hopefully this video is going to be out right before the floodgates of the Nintendo Switch 2 open. If you want to see more from me, click on one of the videos on screen now, and I hope you have a great day.